Grab a Bible if you don't already have one. Deuteronomy Chapter 5. We're going to be here in just a few minutes. Deuteronomy 5. Let me take this off so that you can hear me a little better. There we go. Deuteronomy 5. We have been, thank you, Daryl. Last week he looked at Deuteronomy 6, so we're actually backtracking just a little bit because he's family life minister, so he could do what he did last week, which was look more towards rearing children and that process that we found in Deuteronomy 6. One is lots of things are happening, of course. You know, here we are every Sunday at the children's home, and obviously the building's being built, and that's really good that things are happening on that front. We saw some pictures of pumpkin patch, lots of things happening, and so it's just a reminder that life continues, doesn't it? The church life continues, and that we have lots of great things going on and celebrations. No, I'll stay close to it then. And so lots of celebrations going on also of various. Just a reminder, we have probably 55 or so folks that are in the Spanish congregation now. And that continues to grow, and great things are happening there. And so, Lord willing, and if it all is just right and everything works just right, Devin and Nolani will be going to Texas for a couple of weeks. And they're going to be visiting multiple Spanish congregations that exist in several different locations across the state, and just to kind of gathering information. Okay, what are other congregations doing? What are congregations that are being successful in their Spanish ministry doing, and how are they helping Spanish congregations to grow that are housed within the English congregation? And so they'll be going on that journey for the next couple of weeks. And so just an example of some of the great things that are going on at Longmont Church of Christ. And so now let's just turn to our attention now to the laws. As soon as I mention the Ten Commandments, you probably think, like I tend to think when we think about the laws of the Old Testament, we think, that stuff was all written for the Israelites. It's really not that big of a deal. And we're not under them anyway, and they've been nailed to the cross, so Edward, move along. And so, but I've been really, this lesson is the lesson. One of the reasons I wanted to look at Deuteronomy was this lesson, looking at the concept of the old law, the Old Testament in general. How do we read the Old Testament? How do we look at the Old Testament? The Old Testament was written for you and I right now, today, at this moment. And so how do we look at these commandments, something like the 10 Commandments as well as all the other 600 commandments? And there's always confusion in the secular world, isn't there? This happened in 1998. And so it's been a while since this occurred. In 1998, Dr. Laura, who at the time was a very devout Jew, and she, on her show, on her broadcast show, talks about homosexuality and just some things going on in culture and what the Bible has to say from an Old Testament perspective about some of those things. And after she did that, she received an anonymous letter, and that letter has been circulated far and wide throughout the last 20 years. That was kind of like a secular rebuttal. It's like, oh, you quoted Old Testament scripture, but what about these other Old Testament passages? And some things that were said in this letter, of course you can find it on the internet very easily, but things like Leviticus 20, and so here's Dr. Laura, thank you so much for educating people regarding God's law. I've learned a great deal from your show and try to share that knowledge with as many people as I can. And so he goes on to say, I do need some advice from you regarding some other elements of God's laws and how to follow them. For example, in Leviticus 25:44, it states that I may possess slaves, both male and female, provided they are purchased from neighboring nations. A friend of mine claims that this applies to Mexico, but not to Canada. Can you clarify? Why can't I own Canadians? And then he goes on, I know that I'm not allowed to, when I burn a bull on the altar as a sacrifice, I know it creates a pleasing odor for the Lord, Leviticus 1:9. The problem, of course, are my neighbors. They claim the odor is not pleasing to them. Should I kill them? I have a neighbor who insists on working on the Sabbath. Exodus 35 clearly states he should be put to death. Am I morally obligated to kill him myself, or should I ask the police to do it? He goes on and on with all those kinds of things from the Old Testament. Obviously, this person has lots of problems. They don't understand the Old Testament or the Bible in general, but it's all good because what about us? What about you? When you're confronted with someone who brings to you something that's questionable about the Old Testament specifically, or maybe in the New Testament, what's your response? And if we're not careful, these things become little places where our faith is questioned. We start questioning in our faith what God's all about. And if we're not, and of course the worst case scenario, we can actually lose our faith over these things. Because someone out there is questioning how we do things, what we believe the Bible teaches. He goes on, of course, in all of this. Things like, I know from Leviticus 11, 6-8, that touching the skin of a dead pig makes me unclean. But may I still play football if I wear gloves? And you're just like, right? He's just like kind of mocking, but kind of just like bringing up some valid things about, well, how should we read the Bible? And how should we help people with the Bible? And so this is a perfect opportunity to address some of those things in our own lives and make sure we understand what God's talking about in the Old Testament and the New Testament also, and be able to explain that to others and hopefully help our children, our grandchildren, help ourselves not lose our faith just because there's texts in the Old Testament that speak about not touching pigs, right? And what that means. And so that's where we want to go. And so the rule of law, and Americans in general, as we've talked about during this whole series so far, Americans in general, we tend to not like following the rules. We appreciate not having the rules, like bending the rules just this time because I have a special case, don't we? And so we tend to already lean that way, especially as Americans in our culture. And yet the rule of law is one of the greatest blessings we've ever received. And so what about this law? And so when we think about God's law, it protects us from the government. That's what law is all about. You realize that, right? The very first set, the Bill of Rights, they have been written to protect us primarily from a government that would do something to us. And so that's what rule of law does. It not only protects us from the government, it protects us from each other, right? It holds back unjust power that sometimes people have. And so I have a recourse because of the law. Because there's law, if somebody just arbitrarily comes and changes the locks on my doors and says, it's my house now, tough cookies, go away, and they have guns and they're bigger than us, what recourse do we have to take our house back? I mean, what is there? There absolutely is nothing except the rule of law. As long as that country that your house is located in follows the law, and there's courts that follow the law, then guess what? You get your house back. But if there's none of that, you lose your house. Too bad, right? Because there's no law, there's no rule of law. And so that's very important, isn't it? And so law provides us with dignity. It provides people who are in very difficult situations or have some type of disability, whatever it might be, it gives them some type of recourse. Think of widows, orphans, older folks, seniors, young people. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, doesn't it? I mean, what's to stop this morning from people who have lots of wealth and power from taking over everything that exists around them? Well, nothing except the rule of law. And so laws set us free. And so when we think about the Old Testament now and these laws that were written so long ago to the Israelites, there's something actually special about them. And so I want to help us this morning look at the Old Testament, remind us as we have the Old Testament, it's actually a valuable book. It's actually something that's helpful for us. These laws are not just written for Israelites, they're written for us today. That's the very first thought there on the board, 1 Corinthians 10, right? The Old Testament wasn't just written for the Israelites, it was written for us. It's an example for us, it's instructions for us. It helps us understand how God works and what life is all about. And so these laws actually are critical. Jesus did not abolish the law, right? He fulfilled it, every last bit of it, Matthew 5. Matter of fact, the very first sermon, as we'll see on a slide in a moment, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, what is that sermon called? It's called the Sermon on the Mount. And why did he speak it? What was his sermon? What was the topic of his sermon? His whole topic for 3 chapters was simply, let me tell you how to understand the Old Testament. And that's what he did for 3 chapters. He tells us and everybody that was listening in the first century, here's how you read the Old Testament and understand it. So probably this is a very important sermon, since that's one of the first ones we have recorded from Jesus. God's laws are holy, they're just, they're good, Romans 7:12. So there's something good about law, and we should delight in God's law, Psalms 119. So how do we do that? That's where we're going this morning. How do we delight in laws that are not actually written to us to follow the actual letter of the law? Like, we can touch pigs today. Many of us are going to touch pig at lunch, probably, right? If you've got the pork going and you're going to have pork sandwiches, and you're going to watch a game where they touch, right, pig skin. And so, or maybe you'll even go in the backyard and play a little bit. You're going to do two. Oh my. And so it's like, obviously we don't follow the law, but how do we explain that? Because the law is written for us, and we do follow the law in another way, don't we? And so here we go. God's laws, just one more little thing, and there's your first blank now in your text. So blank number 1, if you're following along. God's laws form guardrails for the road of life. They really do. If we didn't have the rule of law, we would be in bad shape. Some of us would survive. Some of you that perhaps can use weapons well or know how to build high forts and strong walls maybe would survive. But the rest of us, we wouldn't last very long. And so we really like having laws because they really do set up guardrails. You know that principle. Guardrails are always good. It's always better to see a guardrail than just the cliff and you're driving your wheels right on the edge. It's nice to have some type of guardrail, isn't it? And so we know that's true in all kinds of endeavors, and it's certainly true. That's what the law does for us. Okay, here we go, Deuteronomy 5. We're not going to read the whole thing because it's too long, plus you've heard the 10 Commandments many, many times, but we are going to look at them just briefly. So here we go. Moses summoned all of Israel, and he said to them, "Hear, O Israel, the statutes which I am speaking today in your hearing, that you may learn them and observe them carefully. The Lord our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. The Lord did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us, with all of those of us alive here today." Did you catch that? Moses himself explains how this works. He says, God didn't make a covenant with those people back there. He made a covenant with you. And you're like, wait a minute, he did make a covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. What are you talking about, Moses? He's trying to explain. He's not really saying Abraham really didn't have a covenant. He's saying, no, this stuff that I'm giving you right now is really just for you today at this moment. The 10 Commandments are still for us today. I don't follow the 10 Commandments. I follow something even better. And we'll talk about it. That's what we're going to talk about. But this all has been written for me right now. And it really wasn't written for them. It's written for us. That's his point. He's like, it's never ending. It goes on and on and on. It's forward thinking. So while I was standing between the Lord and you at that time to declare to you the word of the Lord, for you were afraid because the fire did not go up to the mountain, he said, "I am the Lord your God, and I brought you out of the land of Egypt." So verse 7, "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol." Verse 9, "You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and on the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me. But I show loving kindness to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments." Verse 11, "You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain." Verse 12, "Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy." Verse 13, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you, your sons, your daughters, your male servants, even your cattle, even your ox. Nobody should do work. Verse 15, "You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out by his mighty hand." Verse 16, "Honor your father and your mother." Verse 17, "Don't kill anybody else." Verse 18, "Don't commit murder." Verse 19, "Don't steal." Verse 20, "Don't bear false witness." Verse 21, "Don't covet your neighbor's wife." "And you shall not desire your neighbor's house, his field, his male servants, his female servants, his ox, his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor." These are the words the Lord spoke to all of your assembly at the mountain from the midst of the fire, and of the cloud, and of the thick gloom, with a great voice, and he added no more. And he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone and gave them to me. And here they are. And so we have the 10 Commandments. If you look in your notes over there, We've got several things. Lots of great things. The Ten Commandments, what we could call the Bill of Rights. You know, we are thankful we have a Bill of Rights. Like what's the very first right? Some of you probably can quote it, can't you? And it's like meant to protect us and give us the ability to do what we're doing right now. That's the very first one of the Constitution, that you and I have the right to worship in this building right now, and the government cannot tell us what I'm about to talk about. And if they do, I have recourse. We go to court, and we'll win, because that's the very first Bill of Rights, unless we're no longer under the rule of law, and then we'll flee, because we're no longer under a government that lives by rule of law. And so the Ten Commandments, they're the first Bill of Rights. It's like God is saying to us, the Lord, and notice in the little box now, the Lord has, notice the first one, the Lord has a right to your exclusive loyalty. See, that's another way to talk about it. It's like the Lord has some rights, and you and I have some rights. And the next person over from us has some rights. And so that's the way to think of these laws. When we think about the Old Testament laws, if you just remember in your mind, okay, he is saying, the Lord is your creator, so he has some rights to you. There's something about him that he has a right to. Like, since he created you, he has a right to your loyalty. He has a right for you to honor his name because he made you and created you and gave you life, and you exist only because he said so. And so there's some rights that he has. But then there's some rights that other people have. Like, you can say don't commit murder, but you could also say it as people next to you have a right to live. They have a right to exist. We firmly believe that, don't we? We believe that from unborn babies till the guy who's 90 years old. Okay, even you 100-year-olds. You have a right to live, don't you? And so there's that right because it's a part of the law. It's a part of what God is saying to us. And so the next 24 chapters contain a whole bunch more, like 613 of them altogether. And so it goes on and on and on and on, doesn't it? And so we're not going to study all 613 this morning or next morning or any of the mornings. And so we're obviously going to skip around in the book. But we're going to use these 10 commandments as kind of an underpinning to all of them to help us understand all of these Old Testament laws and also to understand the Old Testament in general. And so many of them, of course, sound very odd to our modern ears. Like if you start reading the book of Leviticus or the rest of the 24 chapters here, obviously Moses has started his second sermon, and it's a long sermon. How would you like that sermon? Okay, I'm now going to read to you 613 laws. We may not make it this week, right? A lot of them sound really like strange, but of course that's because we're listening with all of the things we have in our minds today, right? All the conceptions and just all the different things that exist since that time period. So how do we read these laws? How do we ourselves understand them with our faith? How do we explain them to others? And so how do we look at the 10 Commandments, for example, and realize, well, you know, these statutes that he wrote down aren't necessarily for us, but there is something for us if I understand what he's doing. And so let's go through that process this morning quickly. And so Jesus will use his very first recorded sermon, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, to explain how to read and understand the Old Testament. So it's something that it's a challenge. Jesus knew it was a challenge. God knew this would be a challenge for us. And so we've got to help ourselves see it clearly and understand it. There's one little blank there if you're reading along in the chapter 5, 6 through 21. They are to be personal policies and not just social policies. These Bill of Rights really are very personal. Like, you should not kill another person. And this is a very technical thing for a second. In the Hebrew language had multiple words for something we don't. Like in English, we only have you. And we don't really have you like as in, we do in Texas, but we're Texans and it's a little different. We have y'all. But most people kind of like, y'all, what's y'all? Well, y'all, right? But we really only have you technically in English, right? And you can be like, it's just you. But it's really y'all. And so, but in Hebrews, the Hebrew language, they have y'all. and you and a whole bunch of y'alls and yous. They differentiate. And it's interesting because in this text, it's you. It's singular. It's very much, there is a personal moral following of the law. It's not just social policy. I'm mentioning that because we as Americans are going through a kind of a revolutionary time of moving so much away from personal to the social. Like if you watch the news at all, if you hear what's going on in our society, it's all about social justice. But you can't have social justice unless you have what first? Personal. Unless I personally believe it's wrong to steal from the McDonald's next week, right? The rest of it really doesn't matter. If I don't believe it's wrong to steal, it doesn't matter. There's going to be no social justice because I'm going to take it all, right? And you will try also. And so it always starts at the personal level. And that's what these laws help us understand. Okay, let's go now to the text, to the thing that's really important. In your notes there, precepts and statutes. Understanding Old Testament law. The Old Testament now is built on precepts. And so precepts are spiritual truths that are grounded in God, into the very nature and character of God. God is a loving God. And so because of that, there are certain precepts, spiritual truths, another way to talk about them. Do you and I follow the spiritual truths of God? Of course we do. But those spiritual truths or precepts that we have are expressed in statutes. Statutes are the local way of understanding God's precepts. They are so simple and this process is so easy. I'll give you a great example. Right now, as I look across the room, I can see Sheil, so I see hers, of course, because she's right there in front of me. Yes, over here. Yep, I've got 2 at least, 3. I'm sure there's more. Oh, Janice, yeah. Oh man, oh you guys are bad. Oh, Heather up here up front is doing it. You're showing your ankles, and in certain cultures of the world, that's immodest. And so you are being immodest right now. Now in America, if you show your ankles or you're being immodest, that's the least of our trouble in America, right? But in some cultures, that's very immodest. And so, but on the other hand, in that same culture where they consider ankles being immodest, they're not afraid to be topless pretty much because they don't think that's immodest. So you can see that their statute is going to be different from our statute. We have actual laws about being immodest and certain body parts, right? And so that are going to be different there. But what's the precept? The precept is, let's be modest and not offend other people. See, it's about that other person, about not offending that other person. And so it's true for this also. So you can say that the written laws enforce certain precepts in a specific situation. That's the Old Testament laws, and you'll notice that that's what Moses called them, verse 1 of chapter 5. The statutes which you are going to be told are here to help you and protect you and give you in that day and place, in that local place, how to live the eternal precepts. So if you're following along here, well, I'll tell you now, and it's going to come up again. Precepts are eternal, statutes are local. A great example exists in our law books right now. Louisiana versus Arizona. In Louisiana, it is against the law. Like, it is against the law, and you'll go to jail if you tear down dams. Why would that be against the law, to tear down all the dams? Because if there's no dams, they tend to do what there in Louisiana? Flood. So if I tear down a dam, it's going to hurt my neighbor because it floods his property. So there's statutes to keep you from doing that. In Arizona, it's against the law to dam up water on your property. Because who will not then receive that water? Your next door neighbor, who's on down the road, who's on down the line, on down the little creek. And so most of the time the creek's dry, but if it rains, he'd like to get some water too. And so there's this process of understanding that the statutes, it's the same precept. What's the precept? Don't hurt your neighbor when it comes to water. Let your neighbor have water, one way or the other. But that precept of letting your neighbor have water also is written in two different complete ways based on the locality and all kinds of things that come into play at that point, right? Where you're at and the local culture and just on the list goes. So the statutes change. The precepts never change. Helping other people, like helping people understand that that's what is behind the law. Laws are not just like, I don't think we should have frogs. Or, there's all kinds of laws on the books. Like, there's laws about frogs, believe it or not. You can only eat a frog if it's entered a contest and won first place. That's in California. But anyway, there's all kinds of laws about things. And it's not just somebody had something out about frogs. It was like, no, there's some reasoning there. It's like Louisiana. Why is this dam here? Well, because we'd kind of like for people to be protected. And so look behind the law. That's the concept. The statutes in the Old Testament strike us as particularly foreign because we didn't live 3,000 years ago in that particular place. And statutes are never intended to be timeless and universal. Never should they be universal. Because they're not eternal. They're just like explaining in that time, in that location, a particular thing. Hebrew writer says it how? And this is your next blank. That they are simply shadows of the spiritual realities. These laws, these statutes in the Old Testament, and I'm on the back page now, they're just shadows of the spiritual realities. They're like the application, and it's going to change like crazy. Because I'm not an Israelite living 3,000 years ago in the middle of a very difficult, barren, difficult land with wild animals and foreign countries and no police force and on the list goes of things that are going on. Where who knew, did they know anything about cooking pork to the temperature that it should be? Of course not. And so the list goes on and on and on and on of differences. So these are shadows of the spiritual realities. We're not bound by the statutes of the Old Testament. We do, however, live within its precepts because we want God to bless us and give us a long life. So in its historical context, every Old Testament statute expresses a precept. Discover the precept, and that's what you delight in. So how do I delight in these laws? I don't delight that I like pork sandwiches. I do. And I'm not going to but I delight in the law that talks about pork in the Old Testament because I know the precept behind it. So I'm going to delight in the precept, not so much the statute. And if we have a statute here in America that is like it's no longer served its purpose anymore, then what should happen to that statute? They should take it off the books, right? And they do from time to time. Statutes about where to tie your horse up. You probably don't know anything about those statutes, do you? And neither do I, but it's going to be statutes that talk about how you shouldn't tie up your horses to block other people's way and hurt other people and trample little children, right? It's going to be all that kind of stuff. That's the precept. And that's still valid today. I probably shouldn't park my car in front of your driveway because it'll block you from having access. And so, just like the horse would. And so, I think we've got that. Okay, I'm going to give you 4 things now, and then our lesson's finished. So here's what I want you to practice. And if you're in a life group tonight, or this week, I've put some various ones of the Old Testament to give you practice, just to practice it, some easy ones, so that when we all get to the harder ones, it's not so hard as we practice reading the Old Testament this way. So how do I read the Old Testament? It's only 4 steps. It's very simple. Do the 4 steps and you'll get it every time. And this is basically just looking right at, it's looking at how the New Testament writers told us to read the Old Testament, but I'm going to kind of summarize it all to make it faster here. And so what do? How do we read the Old Testament? How do we look at these old laws, including the 10 Commandments? Number 1, we uncover what the Old Testament meant. We look at the set of instructions within that time period to get us a mental image of what this text means, what the author meant. Understanding the text involves kind of creating this mental image of what in the world is he talking about. So understanding some of the context of the Old Testament. That's why, just like as John in his communion talk talked about Sennacherib and some of the things going on, there's a cultural context of Samaritans, isn't there? That if I don't understand that in the split of Israel and Judea to the south and the mixing of foreigners into Jewish culture and everything, and if I don't understand all that, it does sound very foreign. So I have to understand some of that. And so number one, uncover what the Old Testament's all about within their context. So that's just looking at the statute more than anything else. So therefore, number two, I need to uncover the spiritual precept. Every text in the Old Testament was written with some type of spiritual truth behind it. And that spiritual truth can be discovered when I read the New Testament. When I understand and I filter now through the New Testament writings. Matter of fact, this leads us to number three, which is bring the spiritual precept to Jesus for its full meaning. When Jesus says, I'm not here to get rid of it, I'm here to fulfill it, he means filter right through Jesus Christ. And he does that for us on a lot of these. He's like, you've heard it say the statute, you shall not commit murder. I say to you, don't even think ill of another person in your heart. See, he's just given us the actual spiritual truth. It's not just don't kill people. It's actually look out for people's benefit. Actually, look to your neighbor and take care of them. So that's the precept. Now, how do I write that down into a statute? Well, it's kind of difficult sometimes to put spiritual truths into statutes. And how do you do that? Well, one of them, like one way, was don't kill other people. That is honoring them. That's like taking care of them, not killing them. And so you can see how that works. It's like behind it is a spiritual precept. So yes, we eat pork, but there's a spiritual truth behind that. What was it about that? And so filtering this through Jesus Christ and letting him help us see it. And so often it's very overt, right? I mean, there's passages all throughout the New Testament that are very overtly quoting the Old Testament passage and saying, let me tell you what that really means. Let me tell you the precept behind that, what it's all about. But here's number four. And so we're going to summarize these again. Here's number four. Obey what you learn. Because until you obey it, you'll never understand it. You know, I can spend the elders could say, Edward, we want you to write a really revolutionary book. We want you to spend some time. We're going to give you like a year, the next year. You just take the next year and write an awesome book. And here's the topic. What it's like to be an expectant mother. And I could do the research. I could talk to Sheil. I could talk to all of you mothers. I could research it out, do all the, and you know, I got biology degrees. I can tell you all the chemistry that's going on and the biology and all of that. But you know and I know that until I actually have a baby, I probably can't really do it so well, right? I just don't quite have a grasp of it. Like I could say, yeah, there's morning sickness, and I watch them have morning sickness. Sheil, Brittany, you know, it's awful. But then I go have breakfast, right? And so it's just hard. And so until you obey it and do it, you don't really understand it. And so that's important when it comes to this. And so here we go. Here's the four I want to challenge you with this morning. Uncover what it meant. So you'll notice there's some work here. It's not just, what in the world is he talking about? Don't do this, don't do that. What in the world? We've got to uncover what it meant to them. Number two, uncover the spiritual precept behind it. Number three, that's using the New Testament. Number three, bring it to Jesus. Filter it through Jesus. What's Jesus say about this? And then finally, number four, put it into practice in your own life, and then we'll begin to understand what the law is all about. I'll give you two examples. Here we go on the first one. And then, should people who trim their sideburns be killed? That's Leviticus 19:27. If you trim your sideburns, you should be killed. Well, turn over there real quick. Do it real fast. We got the time. Here we go. Come on, you can do this with me. I'm going to go through one. We'll skip the next one, but this one here. Look at Leviticus 19 for a moment, because that's one that person actually brought up in that letter. They like, should I kill my neighbor who cut his sideburns? And you're like, well, if it was 1972, maybe. But Leviticus 19, verse 27, it says, you shall not round off the side growth of your heads, nor harm the edges of your beard. What? You shall not make any cuts in your body for the dead, nor make any tattoo marks on yourselves. I know, there's a bunch of us with tattoos. A bunch of you people have tattoos. Do we kill you now or kill you later? Kind of thing, right? We could line everybody up, check everybody out, have you go in behind the window with kind of an official elder's wife or an elder, right? Check it out. Oh, got a tattoo, go to that line. So what in the world are they talking about? Like, what's going on here? Well, sometimes it's helpful to read the text, because he goes on and he talks about it. It's like verse 31, don't turn to mediums or spiritists. Do not seek them out to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. See, there's something going on within that culture. So that's a part of step one. Just what did it mean when we practiced certain things? It meant that you were involved in witchcraft, or you were involved in this or that or the other. And so do not practice witchcraft is actually the precept. So if I step back for a moment from the actual concept and go, well, what was going on in their culture? Well, people who practice certain things were involved in witchcraft during that time period. And so that says you're involved in witchcraft if you're doing those things. And if you're involved in witchcraft, you don't believe in God anymore, and we're going to kill you dead. So, okay, I get it. In their culture and in their time period. But you can hear the precept. Don't believe that there is like this whole like thing you do, and you pray to the demons and to witches, and that this all goes like it goes, right? And that Satan's working and you're honoring him, because that's really bad for you. Galatians 5:19 through 21 would be a text that would go in the New Testament that talks about that precept. So see, I'm taking the statute which would evolve. Could we talk about that spiritual precept today? Yeah, if you like invite me over and do all kinds of hokey pokey kind of weird stuff with stuff, and you're like, I'm going to call on the demons to actually help us out tonight, or like read my horoscope and tell me this is what my future's all about and the planets and all that, I've got a problem with that. That's wrong, right? Because the spiritual truth is there that says that's wrong. It's going to look different from the way they practiced it 3,000 years ago. But that's the whole concept there. And so it goes on, doesn't it? You know, some of you really will touch footballs and eat pork today, right? And it's okay. It's like taking that question within the context. Yeah, that's what they're told not to do. But what did it mean back then? It meant, and you can even read it in Leviticus 11 in the same chapter, be holy, be different. Food back then made you different. You could tell who people were and what their culture was by looking at how they ate. We, of course, eat all kinds of different things today. Food doesn't do that for us. You don't know what culture I'm from just because I'm eating Thai food for lunch today. That doesn't tell you anything. But it would have back then. What's the precept? The precept is we're to be different. We're to be holy. We know that Jesus himself will talk about all food is clean. It's what's coming out of my life. It's like what kind of sin. It's like the sin in my life. It's like I should live a holy life. That precept is going to look a little different. Back then it would have looked like, well, eating pork. No longer do you live a holy life. There's a rebellious thing there. Whereas today, that's going to look different, doesn't it? The statute's going to be different for us Christians. Okay, that's it for our lesson today. Thanks so much for your patience in paying attention to this. Deuteronomy, last one here. Keep the decrees and commands which I'm giving you today, so that it may go well with you and your children after you, and that you may live long in the land and the Lord your God gives you for all time. He says to the Jews, if you will practice these statutes, which have spiritual truths behind them, you will live long and prosper. And it's true in our country. If you follow the law, you tend to prosper. If you break the law, bad things tend to happen to you sooner or later, right? And so it's true even for us today. in our culture, but as Christians, it's most definitely true. But I'm just one brief comment to remind you of this. There have been 930 people that have received a Nobel Prize, Nobel laureates. 930 of them. Do you know how many of them were Jews so far in the count? 200. Jews make up 1/10 of 1% of the population, but 1/5 of all Nobel laureates are Jews. You think about that. God didn't stop blessing those people. He said, when you guys followed the law, I'm going to bless you to 1,000 generations. And they're still getting it, even though they're not Christians today. Even though they're not, I don't even consider them Jews, right? The only Jew now is the circumcised of the heart. I'm the Jew today. But because they are descendants of people who lived and loved God's law, God's continued to bless them. It's an amazing thought. What will He do if you and I follow His precepts today? What will happen to the generation of children if God gives us the future, right? 100 generations from now, what will God be doing with that generation of people who are my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren? Because I decided to follow His precepts today. And so we have to think about, wow, this stuff is like, it really is, it works that way. The law really does help us. I don't follow the Old Testament statutes. I follow something better. The precepts that God placed there at that time period, that are eternal, that are true forever, right? Be holy like God is holy. Help your neighbor. Love your neighbor. That would mean things like don't kill him, don't steal his wife, don't covet his stuff, and like the list goes on and on of ways we can do these laws even today. Thank you for being a part of this. But I'm wanting to give you, when you are challenged, when we hear people say things in our culture today, and they don't understand God's law, they don't understand the Bible, are you going to be able to keep your faith, defend yourself, understand, okay, this is how that actually works? That they just don't know what they're talking about. They don't understand how God works, or the precept behind it. Really, every single time I almost want to, when I hear a person start writing stuff like that, I want to turn to them and just say, so you believe it's okay just to kill your neighbor? You just feel like you can take anything you want from other people. You think that's okay? Oh, you follow some statutes too that you believe are important. And so, or do they not? And so, it's just like turning that back around to, are you understanding? There's some precepts that govern how the world works. Thanks for listening. Let's stand and sing.